excited today to be joined by Sally Bohls from Texas. Sally, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, this is awesome. I'm really excited to talk to everyone.
Yes, and of course, Sally is going to be talking with us a lot about oboe today. And there's some people in here who might recognize the name Sally Bowles and her amazing career. There might be some people who have never heard of the name Sally Bowles. Sally, would you mind introducing yourself to our listeners and telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I am actually a Texas girl, born and bred. I am from Odessa, Texas, so out in West Texas. I was so fortunate. I actually was a piano player at age 5 and started oboe at age 11, and have always had a pathway of just awesome teachers myself that I owe a ridiculous amount to that I can never repay. And so I have been in the Dallas area for quite some time now, since 1979. And I play professionally and I have a private studio. And my friend and I also run a series of camps that we'll talk about. But I've been playing the oboe for, oh my goodness, 52 years, I guess. And I've been teaching privately and playing professionally for 48 years. So oboe is what we do in some form or fashion. And it's the reason I still do it is because it's just too much fun not to do it.
And that's that awesome enthusiasm that we want to bring to our young oboe players that we have at our band halls. And so I was, as I told her before we started filming, is I was very excited when Sally agreed to do this because we knew how much enthusiasm she would bring to this instrument that is so different from everything else in our classrooms, and making sure that we give it the proper attention that it needs. Sally, could you maybe talk to us a little bit about characteristic tone on oboe and what terms might we use to describe that? What are some things that might be a sign of an uncharacteristic tone? How would you describe overall tone on the oboe?
Sure. We are an instrument unique in every way, and it's real easy for us to sound bad. Okay, it just is. When you're reliant on two pieces of cane wrapped together, and you need to light candles and say prayers and Hail Marys and all those things, that it all works when you need it to work, right?
Yes.
And we do all of those things. Yes, we do. But the deal is, it's all about good fundamentals, as it is with any instrument. Okay, you have to not only know what to do, but understand what you're being told to do and how to actually apply it in real time. Parroting back answers, kids. I find that a lot of times they're telling me what I need to hear, and then they're not doing what I say. And so, yes. And so, I mean, we all learn in different ways. And so I have found my asking them, if you were going to teach me the oboe, what would you tell me to do? And they sort of fill me in on what they do and don't understand by how they answer that. So the oboe is, it's a unique part of the ensemble. Hopefully we are a warm voice that contributes to the upper voice in your ensemble. We are, if you put you have upper voices and middle voices and lower voices in your ensemble. We are the bottom of the upper voice. And what we can bring to an ensemble is warmth and depth. And we can round out your sound and take edges off. We can also ruin your ensemble. I mean, one oboe player with reeds that aren't working or bad fundamentals can single-handedly take down your ensemble. We're well aware of that. And so when I am teaching kids, we are all about roundness and fullness and depth and warmth and milk chocolate and all those sorts of things that are just feel good about your sound. So when we are producing a sound, it's our embouchure that we use is set, but it is flexible, which makes us quite different from many, even from bassoon. Okay, so we don't have the stability of a mouthpiece. It's all about what your lip is doing with the reed, but the main component, I guess, is how you're using your air. So with our embouchure, as far as details go, we need to be nice and forward with our corners, and we need to be very round in the center. We don't have a mute, but our bottom lip can kind of be that mute for us. It can mute all the things out of our sound if we have it wrapped in to help cushion the reed. So if I'm telling someone to set up an embouchure, I'm having them, you have the structure of the reed itself. So we have a tip and a heart and a back, all right, just to give you a little bit of geeky information. So, and I can geek out on the oboe for hours. So that's just the way that goes. But you're going to put the heart of the reed on your bottom lip, and you're going to pull the reed, it stays anchored to your bottom lip, and it piggybacks. It never moves independently. It always piggybacks onto that, and you pull in, and notice the roundness, okay? Then you're going to push your corners forward, but your lip is going to stay rolled to the inside as a cushion. So these are very structured forward. The center is very soft, so there is no up and down pressure on the reed, because all that will do is, if this is the opening of the reed, it will just squish. It will just squish you shut. You'll ruin all that lovely sound you're trying to make. So no up and down pressure, all corners to the front, and stay very round inside your mouth. Then we have voicing that we do, which is like vocal voicing, singing high, singing low. But then we also have embouchure voicing. That is, low notes would be more ooh, and high notes would be more wee, ooh to wee, ooh to wee. And I have them do that on the reed itself as a reed exercise. Reed sweeps, we call them, to get them used to the voicing, and their corners always stay forward. So that, as far as fundamentals go with your embouchure, is what's going to go on. Now, there is the breath we take in, and then there's the way we use that air when we push it out. I refer to that as core, because kids are used to that word in this day and time. We used to call it diaphragm, and that's kind of not a term. I'm aging myself when I say that. So I talk to them about core because they understand that. So it's the core air that they're using. We can overblow on the oboe. So, and you also know that we take in, say, if we're filling up a glass of air, we fill it from the bottom up. Okay, and then we use about, if we filled our glass up, we have a tendency to use about half the air and have to blow the rest out. Okay, the resistance factor on the reed and the small little aperture and all those things with the pressure behind the air. So the air is what's going to support your sound. So if you're on let's say you take in a nice comfortable breath, and then if you're on a pressure dial, so the breath you take in would be quantity. So now we're going to talk about the quality of the air. So if you're on an air dial, let's say that goes from 0 to 10, you need to have pressure behind your air that's about an 8. We never really go to the 10 because we just overblow, and we overblow and the reed shuts down anyway because it can't vibrate and contain all of that air and all that's going on at one time. So we're going to take a nice full core breath of air. Then we're going to, when you press the air out, we're going to dial our air pressure up to around an 8, and we're going to maintain it at an 8. Okay, so you have the mixture of what your embouchure is doing and making sure your reed and your embouchure are set correctly, and your corners are nice and forward. You're sitting nice and tall, like an L in the chair. Okay, nice and tall. You don't want to lean back in the chair. I tend to sit further back in the chair. I just don't lean back on the chair. And that's really kind of up to the director. If they would like their kid to sit on the front of the chair, fine. It's not, wherever they want them to sit comfortably, they just can't lean back. There's no reclining in the chair. We need to have a nice tall, so we have all this air that we can use. So, I always laugh and tell kids, pretty much if I ask you any question, the answer is almost always air, because that is, we're dead in the water without air. Okay, we can have perfect embouchure, and if we do not have the kind of air we need, the embouchure is canceled out, because it's the production of our sound is about the constant continuous air pressure that makes that flow and stay steady for us.
For any of our instruments, it's almost a pun at this point where, if the director makes a comment about the air, they're going to do that about 90% of the time. And so I think it's great that we've got this feedback, because sometimes instead of just saying use more air, we need to be using more specific terminology with our instrument players, especially for our double reeds. One thing I want to highlight is, especially for oboe being so different from every other instrument in the woodwind family, of course, being closely related with bassoon. But could you maybe talk a little bit about reeds for beginner players and what is the best way to go about navigating what kind of reed they have? Do they start on store-bought reeds or do they get handmade reeds?
Okay, well, the truth of the matter is a good reed can make a mediocre to not so wonderful player sound pretty good. A bad reed can make an exceptional player sound awful. So it's all about what the individual player needs in a reed. On the market, people tend to sell reeds as soft, medium, medium hard, hard. The deal is it's really not, that's not really the crux of the issue. The deal is with reeds, if you think of them in percentages of control to freedom, so control would be resistance and freedom would be vibration. Generally speaking, most kids play on a reed. You always want a little more resistance than vibration, because the job of a reed is to vibrate. The job of us as a reed maker is to control how it vibrates. All right. So I don't think in terms of soft or medium hard. I think in terms of how much resistance I put in that reed for that kid. So obviously, if we're talking about a beginner who's never played the oboe before, let's say if we're doing percentages again, they might need a reed that is like 60% resistance to 40% freedom. Does that make sense? So there's still, the reed has to behave. The reed has to be, you can't spend your time playing trying to make the reed behave, okay? So the reed has to behave and have those components built into it so that you can put the correct kind of air behind it with the right embouchure, and the reed does what you're asking it to do. So a beginner is going to need a reed with a little less resistance and a tiny bit more freedom until they get all this connected and going together for themselves. And let me throw this in there just as referring back to, for just a second, when you're working on just the reed with a beginner, life is good. Not too much to draw their attention elsewhere. When you start putting the reed in the oboe and putting their hands on the oboe, first thing they're going to do is their embouchure is going to collapse and their air is going to relax because they're thinking about their hands. So always, I mean, you cannot just repeat it. It's all about the set embouchure and the air. And even with a good reed, if you don't have all those things going for you, things are still not going to work. So as the student progresses, okay, they will probably get to the point where they need a bit more, just because of maturity, they need a bit more resistance into the reed that they can blow against, because they understand all these rules that we've got going. And so the more advanced the student becomes, they're going to require a bit more resistant reed. So your percentages in that reed may go up to 70% resistance to 30% freedom, because they just need the behavioral issues in the reed to vibrate differently for them. You know, I would say as a professional player, I probably play on a reed that's about 70-30. Okay. There's also first oboe reeds that need a bit more resistance and second oboe reeds that need a bit more freedom, because where we play in the staff, okay? So obviously the freedom relates more to low response, correct? And the higher number for the resistance is more about the control and the upper register. So for me, it's a balance between those two. If somebody asks me, do I need a harder reed or does my student need a harder reed? I always laugh and say, ain't nobody needs a hard reed. Just ain't nobody needs a hard reed. Sorry, guys. Hard is just hard. The difference between hard and resistant is hard doesn't vibrate. Resistance allows vibration. It just allows however much vibration you scrape into it. Okay. So now hopefully, I mean, because reads are a bit of a black hole, and I understand that. Hopefully, what I have just said, because I think in those secondary classes, the function and how the reads function and what you need them to do is really never clarified for students. Hopefully, what I have just said puts your read knowledge up a few steps on the ladder, because really, like I said, it's the job of the reed, is their job is to vibrate. We just need them to vibrate the way the individual player needs it to vibrate. For some kids, that's a little more vibration. For some kids, that's a little more resistance. And it really depends on the maturity of the player and the maturity of their structure on their face, and definitely on their understanding of how to use the pressure behind their air. Okay, so what happens if you give a reed, as an example, if you give a reed to a kid and it's too hard, it doesn't vibrate enough, first thing they're going to do is bite. And then everything collapses. It's a house of cards at that point. Everything collapses when they start biting, and nothing works because they're biting to try to control the reed, and then they've closed the opening, and then they have to not put as much pressure behind their air because the opening is so tiny they can't. I mean, it's a house of cards. Everything collapses if you give them the wrong type of reed. So hopefully that all makes sense. So hopefully, if you are in charge of getting reeds for your kids, if you have someone in your area that you can get handmade reeds from, and then, you know, there's hardly ever, you know, with my students, I've been teaching them long enough that I know what kind of reed they make. So when they send me a text and say, Mrs. Bohls, could you please bring me a reed next week to my lesson? I know this is Susie, and I know what kind of reed she makes, so I can adjust that reed for her and walk into the lesson, and boom, hopefully it's exactly right. If not, it's minor adjustments for me. So that's not, you know, we're very lucky here that that's the case. And so if it's not, just randomly ordering reeds is pretty much Armageddon. It's just Armageddon, because that way, instead of the reed doing what the kid needs, the kid ends up doing what the reed needs, and that's never a good scenario. So if you have someone in your area that can hand make reeds for them, awesome, go for it. And get the teacher to, if you can, at least that person, even if they're not their teacher, to meet with them at least once so they can hand adjust and figure out exactly what that kid needs. That's the perfect scenario, of course. If you're not in a situation where you can do that, I will say, I had mentioned a camp that we do before. We actually have a brick and mortar store here in the Dallas area. Our organization is called Bocal Majority. And so our store sells everything and anything you might ever in your entire life want to buy about concerning oboe, English horn, bassoon, compture bassoon, any of that stuff. So we have a number of reed makers that make a number, and we vetted all of them. They are handmade reeds. I have played on just about every single reed that's in the store to hand vet and make sure that they fit into the category that we need them to fit into. So if you go to bocalmajority.com, and that's BOCAL, bocalmajority.com, and so you will find in the store that reeds are listed in like beginner, intermediate, advanced, pro. You'll find that. So at our store, you get a little bit of help getting a reed like I have just been talking about. I'll be real honest with you, there are all sorts of reed makers out there that you can order. If I can ask every single band director out there of a favor, please don't go to Amazon and buy 5 reeds for $25 and hand them to your, please. If I can ask you to do one thing for your children, don't do that. It's amazing because it's just, it's hard. You're not going to get the quality product that you would really like your kid to play on for that. And so if you, like I said, we are one reed source. There's all sorts of reed sources out there. If there's somebody, we are in Texas. If there's somebody in your area that you've heard good things about, I would suggest don't buy one reed, buy like a half a dozen reeds and let your kids try them and see if that reed is something that would work for them. Made reeds, I'll tell you, we have not had hardly any luck with. So they are either, there's too much cane off of them, so they're just too soft and too quacky and uncontrollable, or there's too much cane on them, left on them, and they are just a brick. And they, and then you as the band director are stuck with this reed that is a rock and you have no idea what to do with it to make your kid try to play on it. And like I said, first thing they do is they start biting and it all falls apart at that point. So be pretty, do your research and be pretty picky about your reed source, because like I said, even the most talented of kids, the hardest working of kids, the smartest of kids, they're still going to sound bad on a reed that doesn't have the components in it that they need to help them sound good.
And I think for a lot of us here, I'm a brass player by trade. And so for a lot of us, just the things that Sally's talking about, where the percentages and not thinking of it as a hard read versus a soft read, I think that's a very big perspective shift for a lot of us to start exploring exactly what it is that we're going to be needing in our double reads for our students. And so this is, as with every video in this series, this is not the ability for us to solve every problem about the oboe in this video, but I think for many people out here, hopefully that gives them the ability to start learning more about these reeds and figuring out exactly what it is we need out of them in order for our students to make that best sound and to have the most success.
Right.
So you mentioned along the way a lot of different habits that will start to creep in, especially right when they go from just playing on the reed onto putting their hands on the oboe. Are there any other habits that you sometimes have encountered in your years of experience, and not even just for beginner musicians, but also maybe for somebody who's entering a new job and are working with second and third year oboe players that might have some habits we want to avoid? Is there anything you might be able to share there?
Sure. One of the biggest things with beginners, let me kind of do it by age level here just a second. One of the biggest thing with beginners is that as you start going into the upper register for us, remember I said there's oo for low notes and we for high notes. They will inadvertently, when they pull in for high notes, they'll scoot the reed in and get too close to the string. Keep on reminding them that the heart of the reed stays anchored on their bottom lip and it piggybacks. It doesn't move independently because they'll get used to playing too far down on the reed. And then it's exhausting because the further you go down the reed, there's more cane there is on there. And then they start biting anyway, so everything collapses on them. So just be real careful that the fundamentals of the embouchure don't fall apart on them when you start going up in the range. I always start in middle and go down and then go up when I'm starting beginners. So by the time we start moving into what we would call the upper range, we have hardly any range. Oboe is like 2.5 octaves range. And so we almost have just low and high. Our middle range is maybe 2 or 3 notes. And really those 2 or 3 notes can be considered low depending on what you're playing, and they can also be considered high depending on what you're playing, whether you're coming to them or going from them. So our mid range is a little non-existent, and they just need to be sure that they are not only doing the voicing of sing low, and I use their voice because they're coming from 6th grade music class, right? They've sung in choir, they've done all those things. And we talk in terms of singing at the bottom of your range, and we sing as low as you possibly can, and that's where your low notes live. And we sing at the top of our range, and it's kind of behind your forehead. And so there's that voicing, but then there is also the embouchure voicing that has to merge with that. You have to do them simultaneously. If you're doing the inner voicing but not the embouchure voicing, you may not get your high notes or low notes out, and same thing vice versa. If you're doing the embouchure voicing but not the inner voice, so they need to go hand in hand. And that's a bit of a, like I said, just kids will get it. They're smart. They'll figure it out, but just repeat it and do and wash and repeat and wash and repeat and until they they are doing, you know, watch carefully and that they're doing what you're saying. That's probably one of the biggest beginner problems I find, because that's a bit, it's not that it's hard, but it is definitely new to them. It's not, and they've played, generally speaking, at least here in Texas, they've played the recorder before, you know, where all they had to do was kind of go poo with the air. So that's an adjustment for them. And then they had no embouchure really. They just put their mouth on the recorder and did. So they kind of have enough experience to be like dangerous, but not really effective. Right? Right. So
Yes,
you
absolutely.
need to, yeah, you need to sort of guide the experience that they've gotten. And it's great that they've done that because at least they've been used to using their air in some form or fashion, but it's definitely not the same as the oboe. So as beginners, that's probably the biggest thing. And every time you add something new for them, the first thing that falls apart is their air pressure because they're thinking so hard about whatever the new thing is. So I'm always doing that reminder, your air sounds like, your pressure behind your air sounds like you've gone down to a 5. Can you push it back up to an 8? You know, and they go, oh, yeah. And I mean, if you're using that terminology, they'll understand and they'll react immediately to what you're asking them to do. Because it, like I said, we're dead in the water without the right kind of air. So there is that for beginners. Now, as the kids grow older, of all ages, older kids into adult, one of the things that the oboe is really good at is playing out of tune. Really good at it. And we have a bad rep for that, and it's well earned. And, oh, it's well earned. It
It's
is.
either an oboe or an oh no, right? You know?
Yeah. Remember the comment, one oboe can take an ensemble down? There
Yep.
you go.
There it goes.
But,
Yep.
but the deal is we can learn to play in tune. I think you have to, this day and time, there's so many wonderful gadgets, okay, and we have, there's a app that I use a lot with the kids called Tonal Energy, which is awesome and does many things. You can watch your sound, you can, oh, it's really great with all ages, but beginners especially. But I think with all this technology, you have to be careful because tuning has become slightly visual as opposed to audible. Okay. And I talk with my kids about this all the time. Your little ensemble that you're playing in does not live in here in this app. Okay. And so there is tuning and then there is playing in tune. Not the same thing.
Exactly.
Okay. Tuning is when you're doing your practice, you sit with your tuner, you figure out what your pitch tendencies are. And I always have them because I don't want it to become visual. We have the Tonal Energy app on is the one we use. And I have them play the pitch, not looking at the tuner and then turn back and see where they are and realize, okay, I'm sharp. I need to pull it down. So look away again and pull that down and then look back and then you'll see where you are. And it's all about learning where to place the note in order to play it in tune. Okay, so that's step number 1. You have to know your own pitch tendencies because I always tell them if you cannot play in tune with yourself, don't expect anybody else to be able to play in tune with you.
Exactly.
You have to be able to play in tune with yourself. And we are the world's worst at throwing it out there in the universe and hoping some guardian angel somewhere along the line takes care of our pitch. No, it just doesn't happen. So that's the first step. So after they have worked with the tuner and figured out their own pitch tendencies, then we actually go into whatever ensemble is there and we have to play in tune with other people. And so there's all sorts of exercises that I do with kids because the deal is everybody is flexible when it comes to adjusting to pitch, but we are quite flexible when it comes to adjusting to pitch. And so I have a number of exercises that I do with them that allow them to learn to adjust as fast as possible. I'm going to give you a couple of them. I have like 10 exercises I do. I'm just going to give you a couple of them. By this time, and I do this with beginners through college age. And so we have one primary player who plays whatever note I designate. Not looking at a tuner, just play that note where they think it goes. Let's say maybe I tell them to play an F on the bottom of the staff. Okay, so they play that, and however each player, then the rules of the game are that each player has to fit in under that sound. I don't want to hear anybody play louder than that player. And they get good enough. I don't want to hear them enter. I don't want to hear any pitch discrepancy. I don't, and trust they'll do it. They'll get to where they can. And however many kids you have in your section, let's say you have 3 or 4 kids, then as you point, you've got the one who is holding the pitch, and trade it around. Don't make it just your first chair player all the time. If you want responsible players, you have to grow responsible players regardless of where they sit in the section. So sometimes your guy who's sitting fourth, put him in charge, okay? And so have them play that pitch, and then everybody has to join them, and I don't want to hear them enter. And I mean, it gets to where you have 4 players playing and they sound like this one kid. Okay, so there's one, and that's having them adjust on about 4 or 5 different fronts, you know, not just the pitch itself, but the sustaining of the air, the articulation, I mean, whole thing, it's bringing the level of their play. One of the questions that I get from directors a lot is, how do I make my 6th grade oboe player fit into my ensemble, older ensemble, and not sound like a 6th grader? These exercises will do it. Okay, another one is that we played scales at this point. So however many players you have, they have to play a scale, individual notes, and stack them up so everybody gets a note. So let's say you have 4 players and you're going to play an F scale, and they have to make the pitches sound, because they know what a major scale sounds like by this time. They have to put their pitch in tune with the pitch that was played in front of them. So like this guy would play F, this one would play G, B and A and B flat, and so on, until they sound like one person playing a scale. So I'm having them match pitch, I'm having them match tone quality, I'm having them match articulation, it's a training exercise on many different fronts actually, but it's a learning to listen, and nobody has a tuner in front of them. Okay, I'm not asking you to play in tune with your tuner. I'm asking you to play in tune with the guy next to you. That's the difference. Okay, those are 2 of them. I also do arpeggio stacking exercises where, let's say I have 3 players. Okay, so I will have somebody playing an F, and the next one plays an A, and the next one plays a C. And then I go back, and this one and they play whatever note I tell them. They have to play an A, which makes them play in tune with this one. Then this one, I just keep on shifting them around, and then I have them always land on the unison, which is the dominant of the back on the F. So you have 3 players on the F in tune. It's just an ear training exercise. And what they figure out on their own is they figure out how important it is to have the solid, dialed up to 8 air compression behind their sound. Otherwise, they don't have a prayer. It's just too unstable, and they can't find anybody else. And that's another one of the exercises. Let's see. I add vibrato, and I will say for my beginners, March is National Vibrato Month. Yes, it is. National Vibrato Month is March, because by that time in their school year, they have to have a certain amount of integrity and maturity about their embouchure and their air. If we add vibrato too soon, either they can't do it or they do it the wrong way. So when I play with kids in the fall of their beginner year, I don't use vibrato with them. It's all about the best sound you can produce, nice solid sound. And then when we come back after Christmas, I start using vibrato, and they start saying, "What is that?" I say, "March." It's vibrato. We'll add it in March. And by the time we get to March, they are dying to add vibrato. It's awesome. We do a countdown. Literally, the last week of February, we are literally, they're going, do we add vibrato next week? We get to add vibrato next week. And the band director's doing a countdown on the board for 5 days till vibrato, 4 days. But the deal is, by the time I get them to that point, they have enough fundamental maturity about them for me to add that in. And I will tell you what I would suggest to you. Most of your kids are probably going to be able to do that by March. If they can't, stop. Go back to solid sound. Give them another couple of weeks. Try it again. Okay, if you see somebody, the number one no-no for us on vibrato is you cannot move your jaw. Yeah. You cannot, oh my gosh, please, you cannot do that. All that does, if you think reed opening is, that's what it does. And you go sharp, flat, sharp, flat, sharp, flat, sharp, flat, right? So it's got to be air oriented. And I use the syllable he. We do it vocally, and then we do it with air. Then we go to the reed. Then we add the reed to the oboe. And I started on a half whole D because that's basically an easy note to make vibrato happen on. It's harder on higher and lower. And so I start vibrato on a half whole D. I don't want the vibrato to turn into pulsing. Okay, the difference between vibrato and pulsing is, of course, that pulsing is even with the beat, and vibrato is just sprinkles on ice cream, right? So I don't count. I just tell them, do this. Then when you add it to notes, the bridge to add it to notes is you need to add it in odd number groupings, not even number groupings. So I either use a triplet or I use the word opportunity. Yes, opportunity. That's what they get. And by that time, it's so ingrained that because it gives them the ability to do the vibrato and count at the same time, but it's not pulsing. It's not even pulsing. And it will turn into vibrato almost overnight for them if you follow those steps and do it that way. And it also maintains integrity to pitch center. Okay, it maintains their integrity to pitch center. I will say, be careful with the embouchure when you are low. Don't use inside your mouth. Don't use ah so much. It will help your low register speak, but it will make you flat, 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 flat. Okay, use more ooh, ooh instead of ah. So if you say ah, you see what your mouth does. If you say ooh, you see what your mouth does. Yeah.
And what a fun way to introduce the vibrato by having National Vibrato Month. I think that's
National
fantastic.
March 1st.
And there's so many things in these videos that people talk about. We're taking a very basic concept, but especially with those younger players, if you can make it fun, the kids will jump in with both feet and
oh my goodness,
so excited to do it.
Oh, they just, and they maintain all the integrity to the fundamental things that you need them, and like I said, if you see some, and also when they're doing the air at first with their reed, you can have when they're doing the on the reed, have them put a hand on their cheek and do that, and they'll be able to feel if their jaw's moving.
Wow.
Okay. Right. They should not, yeah. They'll feel it, okay? And so they'll be able to police themselves as far as, because I'll say to the class, I can see it moving, but I'll say, is anybody's jaw moving? Can anybody feel your jaw moving? And it's like, yeah, I think my jaw's moving. And it's like, yeah, you're right. So just air, no jaw movement, just air. And they'll fix it themselves, but give them a way to, vibrato has the tendency to be something that lives in our mind, but not come out through our sound as a beginner, okay? We're thinking everything we've been told to do, and we can't hear it. So what happens is we start trying to make it happen, and we try to make it happen the wrong way. And then everything else about our playing collapses, the main thing being our pitch center. So it's go back, keep on when you do your warm up at the beginning of the class every time. And I've done this with older kids as well who feel like they'll come to me because periodically I ask students, what do you not like about your playing? Okay, tell me what you don't like. We'll work on it. We'll find an answer. There's nothing smarter than you. Okay, it's all doable. We just have to figure out the right words that make sense to you, because a lot of times I'll say, as an example, I'll say, the grass is green, and they say, yep, sky's blue. No, 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 grass is green. Oh yeah, sky's blue. It's all in perception. Okay, I'm saying what I mean. They're hearing what they're translating it. So I need to make sure their translation, when I say the grass is green, they say, yep, grass is green. Yeah. And you just have to be real careful regardless of the age of the kid. Another thing that is hard for us is dynamics, which is almost a whole nother podcast, to be real honest. But that's something that I add. March is National Vibrato Month, and generally speaking, April to May is National Dynamic Month. Okay, one thing at a time, we master one thing at a time. But dynamics for us, and it's kind of smoke and mirrors, but it's all about let me do a real quick, is that okay if I do a real quick description of that?
Absolutely,
Okay.
yes.
So with dynamics, when we add dynamics, I have them do it on the reed, and we start with what I call soft air. And don't add air, add pressure to the air until the reed speaks. And it will be a very soft, very solid sound, and then maintain it. Don't add air, just add pressure. That's piano. Does that make sense? Literally start with soft air, add pressure. I'm not adding air, I'm adding pressure to the air. So let's say I'm using this much air and I'm using this much pressure. That equals soft. Okay, so if I'm going to crescendo, I add not only pressure, but I add air as well. And then I can also do it in reverse. Does that make sense? So as I'm playing softly, I'm using less air, more pressure. The louder I go, I'm using pressure and air equally. As I decrescendo, I'm going back to more pressure, less air.
Wow.
Okay, but the weight, I know, it's awesome.
It's mind blowing. It's a whole perspective shift again for
Yes,
a lot of us are used to thinking about when we think about dynamics on instruments.
right, because honestly, it's not so much about the embouchure. One of the things I tell beginners is think of hugging grandma. You haven't seen grandma in a long time, and you're gonna really hug her, but you're not gonna squeeze the breath out of her. Okay, so we're pulling everything in around, and we're not mashing grandma, we're hugging grandma. And then as we see grandma every single day, but we still want to hug her, a little looser on the hug. Okay, I use that. Grandma's great. Grandma's awesome. Grandma has no clue she plays the oboe, but hugging grandma, because that keeps them from doing up and down pressure. It keeps the circular thing all the time. So once again, the best exercise I know to introduce them, and I introduce them to the soft side first, because up until this point, I just want awesome, full air sound, solid. Okay. And once again, air pressure up to an 8, mouth corners 4, not nice and round. And then now we've got to control that. Okay, so like I said, that is where vibrato month is March. Then this happens around the end of April into May. And I started with the soft because they've been doing the big. All right, so once again, this exercise with the it's a game changer. It is a game changer for your kid, for your ensemble, for you will thank yourself. Literally start with the reed, soft air. Don't add air, add pressure, air pressure until the reed speaks, and then sustain it. Cross my heart, hope to die, that will be piano when you put it in the oboe. Then have them, when you put the reed in the oboe, again, I start on a half whole D and I do the very same exercise. Start with soft air, add pressure until the D speaks and maintain it. Then I do a thing where we merge vibrato and dynamics, and they do what I say. So I will start, they follow my directions. I say, we start with soft air until the sound starts, and then I have them maintain that, and then I have them add some vibrato. They follow my finger, and then I have them open up by adding more air as well as pressure, and then they come back down and they keep the vibrato going, and then they take the vibrato away. They follow exactly what I'm doing. So they're doing an exercise that has good sound production, has the addition and subtraction of vibrato, and it has the shape, dynamic shape of your sound. It's awesome.
That's fantastic. And it's, as I've done all these videos, the things that I'm noticing that are trends amongst everybody is hearing Sally talk about a lot of the exercises that she does with her students, but also the way that she's introducing concepts and when she's introducing them, and really taking time to make sure that they're building those good habits before going to that next step. And I think just generally with all of our beginners, anything we can do to start slower and not feel like we have to rush through a lot of these basic things, and really insisting on proper hand position, proper embouchure, all those things, I think are going to make them more successful as
yes. And many of these exercises that I've talked about, especially the tuning exercises, those grow with the kid.
Mm-hmm.
They do them, generally speaking, if I start a beginner, they're mine for 7 years by the time they graduate from high school. But even I've been a college professor, and even with my college kids, because they weren't my kids as a beginner, we still did, it's kind of successful oboe 101 exercises is kind of how I think about them. And so I do these tuning and vibrato and dynamic exercises regardless of the age of the kid. They're just win-win. And when they are literally game changers for the kid. It is the difference between them sounding bad and playing out of tune and sounding good and playing in tune. And the only way we do the ensemble any credit, because remember in the very beginning I said we are an upper voice, but we are the fundamental side of the upper voice. We are the depth of the upper voice. All right, that's what we add that not any upper voice else has the ability to add, I guess. And these exercises that I'm talking about and the concepts of the sound is what allows us to add that to the ensemble. And then when you are a solo player, whether you're a solo player in the ensemble or you're just a solo player as a soloist, it still allows you have the knowledge and the ability of that balance and that blend, whether you're with somebody else or even with yourself. This past spring, I soloed with an ensemble of high school kids here in Capel High School. And we actually talked about and did some of these exercises in the midst of me being the soloist, because it helped them balance and blend to me. Even though I was a soloist, I'm a soloist, but I'm still a member of the ensemble. It's a symbiotic relationship. Either you go down with the ship or you're all champions.
Everybody's on the same team. Yes.
Everybody's on the same team. And so all of these exercises are geared towards making you successful at what you do. And it's all about understanding the fundamental concepts and doing them every single time.
Sally, this has been so absolutely incredible. We cannot thank you enough for all this information. And of course, this video is just the tip of the iceberg with what we can develop as educators for our oboe players. And there's many different resources that Sally has. I'm going to be linking to many of them in the description. But do you have anything in particular you'd like to share with us that might be a good resource for us to grow upon what you've talked about today?
Sure. Okay, so my bassoon friend and I taught in the same school district for years, and we're talking back mid 2000s, so to speak, and there was nothing out there that addressed our instruments very well as beginners. And so we were band directors would come to us and say, what do we do? Because they knew, the band class books are awesome. They just are not awesome, particularly for us. And so they would come to say, what do we do with your kids? Because, I think on the bassoon, they started on E flat, which is some ridiculous thing, right? It's just, like there's 13 keys on the back of that thing. And what are you going to do with all of that? And so, and for us, it started on a half whole note. And I mean, so they were coming to ask us what to do. And so my bassoon friend and I were like handing them stuff to do with the kids. And another friend said, y'all should write a book. And we thought, what? Maybe we should. So we, in our copious amounts of free time, which was almost zero, we sat down and came up with a game plan for a book that was a classroom pedagogy book to start your oboe and bassoon beginners that you could incorporate into the use with your band book. If you had an oboe bassoon class, you could use it for that. If your oboes were in with something else and your bassoons were in with, whatever, it can be used in multiple ways. This is the book. Oh, there we go. And it's just a beginner class boot camp. So this is my bassoon friend and I. And what this book does is it starts with preliminaries, which is the fundamental things that I talked about in the beginning. And then it goes into units where we literally introduce note by note and sort of make method to the madness of adding that. And there's note addition and there's rhythm additions and there's songs to play. And then we add scales as we go because we're both theory geeks. That's the way that is. And so, yeah, it just, it's got to understand the alphabet, got to understand the scales. Yeah. So, but this book takes them completely through their beginner year. And it has also a whole bunch of books and stuff in the back that takes them actually beyond that as well. So this is our book, and it is available on the Bocal Majority website that I talked about. We have gotten ridiculously, thank you, Lord, wonderful following and reviews from our book. If you would like to try our book with your kids, please. I also have videos of the unit where Jennifer and I are teaching them, where if you would like access to that, I can let Tyler have access to those. We did videos because a lot of this came back out. We were trying to figure out during the pandemic how to help band directors. And so we ended up we each videoed our unit. So the teacher book for this has both oboe and bassoon. Oh, okay, let me open up further. Oboe is on one side and bassoon is on the other side. And then there's also individual books for oboe and bassoon. But we did videos of the units to help them teach their classroom during the pandemic. So we have all of that, which I am more than happy to share with you. But the book is for sale if you want to try that with your kids. I do have to say there's really, I had a teacher who used to say, if you want to be successful in your area, find a hole and plug it. And that's what we did with this book. We found a hole and plugged it. And there's not really anything else out there quite like this. Our goal was to get to where your kids had enough knowledge to play Frosty the Snowman by Christmas. Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of where the year splits. There are 12 units in the book that take you through the year. And so we feel like it's a really good fundamental start for your kids. So there is that. We also did our own fingering chart, which is of course bright pink for me. But so we also do band director boot camp. So there's a book that is set up for actually sort of like the secret sauce for band directors that has a bunch of stuff in it. And so we all of this came out of our desire to help you, because what we were hearing were just like tragic stories that somebody, especially those of you who tried to do our instrument during the pandemic with your secondary music classes. Oh, bless your heart. I don't even know how y'all did that. The other day, we had somebody at one of our camps. We do band director boot camps where we teach. They come and bring oboes and bassoons with them, and we do 3 days of a camp and 3 hours a day of oboe and 3 hours a day of bassoon. And we play through all 12 units. We literally start them in 3 days' time. They've done a year. And so one was saying that because of the pandemic, she didn't even play on a reed.
Oh my gosh.
During her secondary class. And I mean, what do you say? I mean, yeah, I mean, it's heartbreaking. And I mean, even not during the pandemic, still, and I understand, I mean, my bachelor's degree, actually, I was going to be performance all the way. And that's all I wanted to do was play. And my counselor, my advisor, my freshman year said, he had played fourth horn in New York for years and years and years, and ended up at Texas Tech retiring and taught it. He said, you can play without a degree. You just have to go in an audition. You can play without a degree. But he said, if you graduate with a performance degree, you don't have a way to get a job. So he said, why don't you do a music ed degree and you can play all you want? And I thought, oh, cool. And so I did. I have an all-level music ed degree. My bachelor's degree is an all-level music ed degree. I have never used that degree to get a job, but I have used my knowledge from that degree every single day. And as an oboe player, we go through life with blinders on because it's all about the next read, right? And doing a music ed degree was like taking the blinders off and going, oh, who knew there are other people out there? I had no idea. There's other instruments. What? And so it was the best thing I could have done was to do an all-level music ed degree. So I am certified to teach. I have a lifetime teaching certificate K through 12 that, like I said, I've never used it to get a job, but I use the knowledge every day. I did secondary instruments, all right, and I understand that I felt like I walked out of that with enough knowledge to be dangerous but not effective. I think I passed clarinet with the promise I would never teach it. Right?
Yeah.
I clarinet and oboe, anyway. And so I understand the frustration and the feeling of helplessness that you have. I remember when I student taught and the band director said, I need you to go start these French horn players. I broke out into a sweat.
Absolutely.
I made my way back to campus to that same horn teacher and said, how do I start beginners? And he just laughed and gave me all sorts of literature. I was helpless to do that. And yet I was responsible for setting those kids off on a successful pathway. I couldn't have done it. And so I absolutely understand the fear and the frustration and helplessness of, and my instrument in particular is probably at the top of that helpless list, and so if there's any way I can help anybody, you are more than welcome to contact me. I'm going to give Tyler all sorts of information that will hopefully help you out and links and that sort of stuff. But I do understand somebody saying, I need you to start these kids, and you don't even have a clue where to start. I've been there, done that. And so my master's degree is oboe performance. So we went that route for that one. But I am so glad I did the music ed degree. And I have to say, for those of you out there who are band directors, orchestra directors, choir directors, elementary music teachers, I have such a profound respect for you and what you try to do every day. And you have the full force of my knowledge base and support if I can help you out in any way.
I also have a music ed background, and I had some great methods classes, secondary methods courses, and I had some that were not so great, and that didn't really help me out at all when I got into the classroom. And so You know, and so for me, again, oboe is, I can confidently say, was the instrument when I got to the classroom I was the most insecure about. And I'm pretty certain that I was afraid to ask questions because I was afraid of making it appear that I don't know, and really understanding that a lot of directors are just looking to do whatever they can to continue to be better at all these instruments that are not their primary instrument. And so I can't thank Sally enough for really being so supportive of us all learning more about the oboe. And Sally, would you mind sharing with us real quick your email address in case anybody wants to reach out to you?
Certainly. And you are more than welcome to email me. It is sboeh at verizon.net. Stands for Sally Bowles Oboe English Horn.
That's amazing.
SBOEH at verizon.net. And you are more than welcome to email me if I can help you in any way. It's, you know, it's a tough road, and it's better to go down it with friends.
Absolutely.
It just is better to, you know, like I said, we're all in this educator game together. And it's such a uniquely wonderful thing that we're able to do, and the lives that we're able to touch. As I said early on, this is actually, I'm going into year 49. I still hear kids who are from 48 years ago. I mean, honestly, it's the difference we make as educators. And I know it's frustrating in this day and time. Don't get paid well. I mean, I know there's so much, but there is almost not a more noble profession, I don't think, than being an educator. And I think we have to be there. It's not a competition. I think we have to be there for each other. Like I said, either we all survive or we all go down with the ship. I mean, and the deal is we are certainly able to survive and succeed. And the only way I know I love what I do. And the only way I know to ensure a future for that is to teach and train somebody to love it as much or more than I do. And that way I can ensure that I'm not going to be around a lot forever. And when I'm gone, somebody else is going to do that in my place. And I think it's vitally important that we make sure that happens.
I could not agree more, Sally. And we appreciate you sharing everything that you know with us, and sharing your inspirational words and your wisdom and everything, and being so supportive of all of us as we are on this journey together. And we just cannot thank you enough for your time.
Sir.